Hello. So I have a super fun day. I can't wait to show you. We are working from the Flavor Cookbook from Forks and Knives. Actually, I have not said this yet. This couple, there's a woman that made this book, Darshana Thacker. There she is. And the man who met her wrote the documentary, Forks Over Knives, and they ended up developing this love interest. So, haha, how cute. But today we're making a spicy miso ramen. Ours, because we have little ones, is going to be less spicy than some, and that is okay. So I'll talk a little bit about how that's going to work in our house. And I've gotten a few things going so that we can kind of move. The first of which is, the first step is prepping your noodle. And if you're using a rice noodle, and you don't have to, you could use a buckwheat noodle or a wheat noodle or a brown rice noodle, it doesn't matter. But I'm using the traditional rice noodle. This one is kind of a wide one, and it's currently soaking in water to get a little bit soft. And then I've actually turned my burner on. It soaks in water for 30 minutes, and then it boils for 2 minutes for soup. And then I'm going to cover it in cold water, and it's going to stay like that until we eat, hours and hours later. But it comes in a package. This one came in this type of a package with the directions on the back. And the thing is, if you're not used to making rice noodles, you're going to say to yourself, that sounds a lot different. That sounds weird. Trust it, right? Whatever the package says, trust it. When I'm making gluten-free noodles, if it says cook 7 to 9 minutes, I cook 7 only, because they're a less durable noodle. A wheat noodle is very durable. Okay, so that's enough about that. We're going to create a slurry that's inevitably going to go in our broth. So I have an empty bowl here. I've got a full cup of water because I'm making a double batch, otherwise it would have been a half cup. I have a half cup of miso, which otherwise would have been a quarter cup. And I'm going to need something to get it out of my measuring cup. This comes in a large container. And then I have something called chickpea flour. They actually make this a lot now in stores, but I ground mine using a high-speed blender. So I had dried chickpeas, and I just stuck them in there, and it whirled up. You can do that with oats. You could do that with pretty much anything, actually. So let me just make sure I get the right amount. 2 tablespoons, which is 4, and I will be honest, I have no idea how much this is, so I'm hoping it's 4. It looks like it will be. We're in good shape, yay! 4 tablespoons it is. And to combine this, I'm just moving it around with a fork. Just old school grandma technique. This is how my mother did it and how her mother did it. You can also use a whisk. That's like the chef way to do it. But back apparently before people could afford a whisk, you just used a fork. And sometimes, because it's a little smaller or whatever, people like that. But anything where you're adding some flour to a dish is what they call a slurry, which will thicken up the soup a little bit later on. So that's all set. We're going to set that aside. In my pot here, I have 12 cups of water already in there, already on, getting ready to cook, because we're going to boil the base. And so I just want to show you what's going to be going on here. So I've showed you one technique before of just cut off the end of a garlic, maybe slice a little part and then peel it off. Another way to do it, this is a meat pounder. So the flat end, you can see I've already started. I did 5 out of 6 already. One thing that you can do is put your garlic down and just smash it. And when you do, that skin gets all loose and it just peels right off. Super fast way to get your garlic out. See that? It's all done. I learned that on Queer Eye. So there's a technique that you can now use in the future. And then all we're going to do is add that garlic minced into our broth. And so I'm going to use a garlic mincer. I'm going to stand on my tiptoes because I'm short. But one thing that you could also do is chop it up with a knife. You don't have to use the garlic mincer. The fact that you crushed it like you saw me do would mean that it's ready to release its juices. And that's kind of the thing. If you just open up a clove of garlic and cut it, it'll be fine. but it won't have the same flavor release as if you had crushed it a little and released those juices. So releasing those juices, totally a win. But a lot of Asian-based broths start with like a garlic ginger miso flavor. And that chickpea flour that we put in the slurry, you could use another kind of flour. That is the timer for my noodles that tells me they've been soaking for 30 minutes. So I'll turn that off and keep in mind that they're ready for the next step. I've also started a pot of boiling, well, water to boil for those noodles. It's only like 2 minutes. The thing about garlic is it's really sticky. So I've also mentioned to you, if you don't have the fresh, you could just use garlic powder. For something like this, I might do 3 teaspoons of garlic. Usually there is a measurement. You could even look it up. What's the measurement of fresh to dry? But I have garlic on hand, so I'm going to use it. But once you've got your hands all up in there, you need to wash your hands because they're so sticky. It's just the worst. So I'm almost done here. This is a double batch, so ordinarily it would have been 3 garlic cloves. I used 6. So you're welcome to join me at the sink. I'm just going to take my hands through some of that so that garlic doesn't dry into the press. While I'm over here, I can go ahead and drain. These were resting in lukewarm water. So I'm going to drain them out into the colander. And now they're more supple. They were just dry before. Let some of that water drain out. It's really not like it's going right back into water, but only for a short time. So I'll come over here to my second pot, which is on the cusp of boiling, so I'm going to call that good. Dump that in. Make sure you get all of it or somebody's going to get a crunchy noodle later. And then I'm going to set my timer because 2 minutes is going to go so fast and I don't want to miss it. So, okay, speaking of things that I'm out of, I am out of fresh ginger. So dried ginger it is. I knew I was going to be out because they were out at the store and I knew I was going to have a heavy week and I just don't have time to go back. So they're calling for a ½ tablespoon. I'm going to stick in 2 teaspoons of dried. That would have been a full tablespoon. I'm kind of guessing. I did not look it up. And then I might just give that a quick little stir just to incorporate those things. So the ingredients say combine that slurry that we did and then combine, oh, we get to add our bamboo shoots too. Great, I get to talk to you about the bamboo shoots. So these I bought in a can and then I've cut them even further. They were sliced into like 1 inch, but very thin. And then I kind of matchsticked them. But I did not matchstick them very carefully. Like, ooh, I've got to make sure this is perfect. Let me stir those in. I'm going to give my rice noodles a quick stir too, because anytime you put something gummy into water, the chances that it could just stick together exists. So make sure that that's not happening. It seems good. I hear my dog is having fun. Okay, so bamboo shoots, ginger, garlic, and water. Bring to a boil over high heat. So today I'm just using a regular saucepan. I normally would have used my Dutch oven because I can. But I have to take my dinner tonight to a different location. So I don't want to carry that big heavy thing around down the stairs and all that jazz. Okay, my noodles have 19 seconds to go. I've got the colander ready. So I'm going to show you the next part of this process. And I'll set you up here so that I'm not moving something very hot and boiling while I'm talking to you. But this next part is a really big deal because I'm going to drain these. And then I'm going to put them in cold water. And this is how you're able to make noodles ahead of time. So when people say like, oh, how do you get it all done? I just don't understand. I can never do what you do. I cook when it's convenient for me, and then I have something that can stay. But noodles, if you just set them somewhere, would dry out. And I've got cold water going right now to stop the cooking. And I'm going all around. Your noodles are going to be hot on the bottom, so I'm sticking my hand in here, but I'm being very careful to go where the cold water has been. And honestly, rinsing your noodle with a little cold water is going to get some of that extra gumminess and starch off of it, which is going to be a total positive. You're going to want that. So I'm rinsing through those. I don't really need to make them stop because I'm going to stick them right back into cold water. And I have to carry this as well. So what I'm doing is putting just enough water in now to cover them so that when I carry this, I'm not carrying something that's sloshy. And then this particular bowl has a lid. So this cold water is going to keep them from sticking so that later I can just use a regular noodle picker upper, or clearly your fingers, to get them out. Last year when I first started cooking like this, I was using oil to keep things apart. Another option, of course, but what happens when you use oil? You add calories and fat that didn't need to be there. So my lid's gonna go on, and that's just gonna be there. I probably don't need to this happens to be some old school Tupperware that I inherited from somebody. But there's all kinds of ways you can do this. There's Pyrex dishes. Sometimes if I'm catering something, I use like an aluminum pan and just cover it with tin foil. So back to our broth, which is cooking up nicely. It's also like a really beautiful day here. Like the sun is shining and it's kind of windy. And before it had been rainy and windy yesterday. So this is so great. But let me talk to us. So as this is getting hotter, we actually want it to come to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, I'm going to stir in the slurry. The directions say to give it 5 minutes just to boil on its own, which is fine. But I don't really have time for waiting like that. It's really about letting the flavors meld. And the reality is this is going to sit here and I'm going to warm it up again later on. And so I'm not so concerned about whether or not my flavors are going to accurately meld. But while we're waiting for that to happen, before we stir in the slurry, so the slurry and then this thing called a dash of torgashi. Torgashi is a special spice you can get at an Asian market or possibly a really good supermarket that knows they have a population of people that would buy it. I don't have it on hand. You could also use cayenne pepper or red pepper flakes or sriracha. I'm probably going to use a touch of sriracha, but here's the thing. I've got all these babies, and sriracha is super spicy. So I'm going to add maybe a half a teaspoon, just enough to give the broth some flavor, but not enough to cause my kids to go, right? Like I don't want them upset about their meal. Grown-ups then can add extra sriracha later if they want. So that's going to go in, and that's going to thicken, and then we're going to add in some vegetables, some chickpeas, some corn, some carrots, and at the very end some kale, some scallion, and some nori sheet, which is what they wrap sushi in, the seaweed. You sprinkle on top as a garnish when you serve it at the end. So exciting. But that does remind me I need to get my corn out of the freezer. So feel free to walk with me over to the freezer. Oh wait, I don't have any corn. I have green beans. Let's walk over back here. So I want to show you something else while we're waiting. I here have 2 grated carrots. So the recipe called for 1, but I'm making a double batch. And these started out as 2 long carrots, probably about like this, and probably about this thickness around. And I used a peeler that juliennes things. So you hold on one end. I like to turn so that all my sides stay equal, flip it and all that. So I'm ending up with a longer strips, so then once I'm done with the carrot, I just divide them into slightly shorter strips. I would only do that with like 2 carrots, maybe 4 at the max, because otherwise I feel like it would take too long. But when I'm doing a small number of carrots, for me, it's better than pulling out the food processor and doing the grating that way because more dishes. However, if for like the week I was prepping all my grated carrot, I might go ahead and just take 10, 12 carrots through the shredder on Monday morning or something. So this is ready. It's starting to boil. You can see that miso smells so good and it's going in my broth. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna use my spatula to get all that good stuff off the side. So my bowl is mostly empty. And I'm gonna stir, stir, stir because I want that flour to incorporate without clumping. It's a really important part. And what this creates is sort of a cloudy look. I think I can probably tip you over a little. My light bulb burned out above the stove, so sadly I don't have light up here. But someday I'll have light again. So it's cloudy. It's very beautiful, very aromatic with the garlic and the ginger. And this needs to get thick. So see how windy it is? Like it just knocked over a cup because my shade is... But that's fine. We can live with a little bit of wind in our lives. Although I will say it's fall and all that wind means that those leaves are gonna go, go, go. And fall is my favorite time of year. So I always really look forward to that beautiful burst of color. I find it so funny that, of course, it's like the shortest season. So as this is, it's nice and warm, it's boiling up. I'm just making sure 4 tablespoons to like 13 cups of water, because there's a cup of water that was in that slurry, and then 12 cups that went into the broth. It shouldn't be like gravy thick, right? It's just going to give it a little bit of thickness, just a touch of thickness later on. So that's doing a really good job. I talked a little bit about this carrot. So the other thing that I didn't mention, you can buy matchstick carrots. So if you're like, I don't want to do either of those things, they both sound horrible, totally fair. Don't do either of them. Go ahead, buy the matchstick carrots. There have been times in my life where that was my story an entire season, like the whole winter or something like that, because we're busy and, you know, the store has these things that are available to us. So these green beans, I think if it called for 2 cups of corn, it'll be 2 cups of green beans. My oldest and I love fresh green beans. So I'm going to save a few out that we can just eat raw. But enough that everybody else can get some beautiful food as well. So this is very close. It's really as it gets to that boil that activates your flour. And you've seen me in other videos substitute cornstarch when I was out of arrowroot. So if you come to any dish and you're saying, shoot, I don't have that thing on hand, I thought I did, I must have used it, or I can't find it, or I don't want to spend the money to have so many things in my house, any thickener will get you where you want to go. There's, you know, I'm guessing the chickpea flour in this recipe is because of the chickpea beans that are going in, creating a protein in the dish. But these Asian-based soups, you get this really beautiful, flavorful broth, some veggies with these rice noodles, and it really is a crowd pleaser. People will often be so impressed. There's no need to be impressed, but it's really tasty. So this is doing a great job. The thing is I don't need to throw my vegetables in until I'm almost completely ready, because these I steamed already. Your carrot is going to cook so fast because it's barely any size, right? And your chickpeas are already pre-cooked as well. So they call to be rinsed. I turn them upside down. I'm putting them in a broth, so they don't need to be perfectly rinsed. Some people worry about the gas that you might get from bean juice in a can. Other things I've read debunk that notion is like, it's not possible, it's just not true, don't pay attention to it. So, in goes my carrot. Lovely, wonderful, beautiful color, right? That's going to be such an exciting color, such an exciting texture. In goes my chickpeas. It's 2 because I'm doing a double batch. And then in goes my lovely green bean. and the greenery at the end. So I can just give you a little bit of a chat about that. I happen to have today a spinach and kale mix. The recipe calls for just kale, is my memory. Carrot, where'd it go? I can't find it. But I happened to run into this, and this is kind of a nice middle ground because we have those littles, so the texture will be a little bit varied. Your kale leaf, it's still baby kale versus your spinach leaf, but spinach cooks up a little faster and is a little more slippery and not so hard to chew. Baby kale is going to be less hard to chew than regular, of course, but it's a little denser in texture when it cooks up. So just kind of things to keep in mind when you're cooking, because you can adjust your texture. Another thing you could do is use escarole. It's really near all those same things. You could do Swiss chard. You're going to have that extra stem, which you actually could put in. It's beautiful. That rainbowy Swiss chard, that one where you see the red and the yellow, would go great in a dish like this. Bok choy would go great in a dish like this. Enoki mushroom, you could really play, or just regular mushroom, but if you have access to those like straw mushrooms, they're white with a little head on top. Oh my gosh, I love them. When we do hot pot, that's the thing. Okay, stir, add kale, chickpeas, corn, and carrot for 2 to 3 minutes until the kale is wilted. So I'm not going to measure this. It says, I'll just tell you so you know. It says 2 cups. So actually this is probably like 6 cups dry. But with your greens, it all cooks down. So I don't worry a lot. Like, am I getting too many vegetables? I think it's worth it to ask, like, am I getting too much oil or too much sugar? Or, I don't know, even too much carb. Like, oh, am I getting too many noodles? Do I need to add more vegetable to my life? But am I getting too many vegetables? Never a need. Never a need. This is going to go so quickly, I'm just going to turn it off, actually. And then this is scallion. So it calls for 2. I cut up everything I had in the fridge. I was not good to my scallion. I didn't wrap it before I put it in the fridge with some like wetness around it, so it started to wilt this week. It's totally my fault. I just was busy and hurrying when I bought my scallion. But it's gonna still flavor and be really tasty. So around and around that goes. You can see, right, even though we had a slurry, it's not super thick. There we go. Everything still moves and is quite viscous. It's gonna add just a little thickness. And then I just want to quickly show you. So this is my kitchen island. It's full of Halloween candy right now. Down here, I just want to show you the nori. So they come in these really beautiful sheets. And once wet, they get a little sticky and gummy. But they come in these big sheets. I won't pull it out all the way. And you can just crumble it up on top. You could also buy the snack size, but you're going to pay a lot more for that. So these sheets will actually just come with me when we go to our destination tonight. And so what's going to happen is I'll bring my water with the noodles just as they are, right? It's roughly up to here. I'll heat my soup, my broth, and I'll bring these 2 pots in the front, right? So I'm going to be driving, they're going to be next to me. And then my nori sheet. And I'll just assemble when I'm at the place. So again, when people say, how do you do this with your family? This is a really creative day. We have an event tonight. Our kids have dance right after school. So I have to pack the car at 3, and then we're going to be at dance until 4, and then we're going to be at this location. We're going to eat, we're going to have an event, and then we're going to trek it all back home. But that's how we do it, so that we're not just eating McDonald's or pizza or something like that. And the thing was, we had a child who would throw up after eating fast food. Something about it does not go. So you had to get creative, and that kind of forced us to say, how do we make creative meals so that we're not throwing up, so that we're not feeling sluggish, having these digestive systems that are just blah. This is how we do it. So I hope you enjoyed that. I think it's a super tasty meal. I'm going to add a little bit of sriracha right at the end here as a finishing touch. But remember, I'm just adding a touch. You could also use cayenne pepper. You could use red pepper flakes. or you could put in the full amount of sriracha, or just add it after the fact. A lot of people do that too. But thanks for being with me, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.